important one. Marquette, like most private universities, guarantees its faculty academic freedom. It promises them that they cannot be fired or punished for exercising rights protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Yet it has suspended John McAdams for blogging, for simply reporting on and writing about a matter of great important public and institutional interest. This is what happened. A student came to Professor McAdams with a complaint. The student said a philosophy instructor had told him that opposition to same-sex marriage would be considered homophobic and would not be tolerated in her class. This instructor was someone who, while a graduate student, was a paid employee of the university, given authority over and responsibility for educating its undergraduates. In fact, during the conversation with the student, she referred to herself as a professor of ethics. While the classroom discussion that led to this exchange may have been about John Rawls and his equal liberty principle, the after-class conversation between the instructor and the undergraduate student was not so limited. Her warning against the expression of opposition to same-sex marriage was absolute and unqualified. We know the student's version of the exchange was true because he recorded it. Now, the student tried to go through channels. He tried to complain to the College of Arts and Sciences and the philosophy department, but he was rebuffed. He was told to change his attitude. Behind his back, they called him an insolent twerp who was engaged in offensive discourse. No one ever told the instructor that saying such a thing to a student, as she clearly did, would be wrong. So Professor McAdams wrote about the matter. He expressed the view that to label particular points of view as offensive and beyond the pale of civil discourse is not what a university should be about. He expressed concern that this form of political ostracism has become a favored tactic on the left. Agree with him or not, his concerns are not unusual. The issue of campus censorship is currently a major issue across the country. Now, for the sin of writing an accurate blog post on a matter of great public interest, Dr. McAdams is being suspended without pay. This is on top of a 3-month suspension that was summarily imposed without a hearing in violation of the university's faculty statutes and Professor McAdams' contract. But it is worse than that. Professor McAdams is now being told that he will not be reinstated unless, almost in the manner of a Soviet show trial, he admits his guilt and admits that his conduct was reckless. It was not. He cannot admit that. The university has expressed concern about emails sent to Ms. Abadi by third parties who Dr. McAdams does not control or even know. Yet it is conceded, as it must, that it ought not hold Dr. McAdams responsible for the bottom feeders of the internet. But that is precisely what it is doing. It is punishing speech because someone else, somewhere else, might themselves say things that are offensive or abusive. It is hard to know how any Marquette professor could know what he or she can say on any topic about which others might feel strongly. It is hard to exaggerate how unusual Marquette's actions are, and indeed they have drawn condemnation across the country from commentators of varying political stripes. Marquette's actions are inconsistent with the very foundation of academic freedom and free speech, which ensure that discourse cannot be limited by what is popular or what the authorities are willing to tolerate. Marquette has said that it welcomes debate and self-criticism. That is precisely what Professor McAdams was engaged in. What Marquette has done is truly sad. I used to work at Marquette. I have great affection for the university. But the actions of its current administration in this matter are unworthy of a great university. What Professor McAdams is doing today is critically important. He is standing up for free and open discourse on campus. This morning, on behalf of Professor McAdams, we filed a breach of contract action in the Circuit Court for Milwaukee County. Marquette holds itself out, as it should, as an institution committed to academic freedom. We intend to hold it to that commitment. If there are any questions, I or Dr. McAdams will be happy to respond.
What are you looking for in terms of damages?
This is not a case about money. This is a case about a principle. This is a case about establishing that academic freedom means freedom. Free speech means free. Dr. McAdams' interest is in holding the university accountable. Obviously, there will be some damages for the period of time during which he was not paid. There may be some other damages, but to be honest with you, that's secondary. This is about vindicating and validating an important principle, and a principle that is important not only to Marquette University, but to universities across the country, and that's why Dr. McAdams is doing this, and that's why we're here with him.
Would it at least, though, be his salary plus legal fees potentially?
Well, I don't want to get into the particulars of it, but their salary, there's some reputational damage involved. Absolutely.
Marquette has said, in addition to naming this instructor, or in addition to acting as a journalist, that Professor McAdams also had a role as a faculty member, and that played a role in their concern over how Cheryl Latte, this other faculty member or graduate instructor, was treated. Does he have any additional responsibility as a faculty member, not just as a journalist, when he's making a blog post like that?
It's an interesting thing. They say that, but Dr. McAdams, of course, had no responsibility over the supervision of this particular instructor. She did not work in his department. And the university has said, look, there's no rule against criticizing colleagues. There's no rule against criticizing students. We just are going to punish Dr. McAdams for doing it in this case. And when you're talking about academic freedom and freedom of expression, it is important that the rules be clear so that everyone knows in advance what is permitted and what is not. If freedom of speech and academic freedom is subject to some after-the-fact evaluation in which a university says, well, you know what, we would have done it a little bit differently, then we don't have academic freedom or freedom of expression at all. And this notion that somehow he should not have named an employee of the university acting on its behalf is extraordinary. There are many journalists in this room, and you know that when we engage in discourse on matters of public interest, we usually tell the public who we're talking about, because that's how our reports have credibility. Now, there may be some exceptions, victims of crime, minors, in which we don't do that, but none of those apply here, and the university doesn't even really claim that they apply here, because they say that there was no rule anywhere to be found that prohibited what Dr. McAdams had done.
Rick, has there been any communication between you and your client and with Marquette University other than the letters that have been exchanged so far?
I can't comment on that.
The lawsuit talks about irreparable harm to reputation, emotional harm. Professor McAdams, would you be at all interested in telling us a little bit about kind of just what it's been like for you since this began?
Well, it's bad being in limbo. So it's bad being in limbo, right? For example, somebody might think for much of this time I've been off getting paid up until the 1st of March. Hey, isn't that like a paid leave? Well, no. Number one, it's hard to get any scholarly work done when you're in limbo. Number two, it's hard to concentrate on anything else when you're engaged in a battle. I think I've averaged about 2 interviews per week for the past, well, since November of 2014. So it's entirely disrupted my life. I won't claim to have been terribly depressed or had to talk to a psychologist or anything, But it has completely disrupted my life. I love teaching. I haven't been able to teach. In terms of getting any scholarly work done, the disruption, again, including fighting the battle, talking to my lawyers, talking to the media, really have meant that this is a wasted year and a half out of my life that would not have happened if Marquette had not done what Marquette did.
If you were to not win this suit, what type of precedent would that set, do you think, at universities across the country in terms of free speech?
Well, it would set the precedent that tenure doesn't mean very much. That they can get mad at a professor for doing something they don't like, but which doesn't violate any rules. And Rick was correct, there's no rule against criticizing somebody on the faculty or criticizing a student. If you look around, you'll see that it's normal in universities for professors to criticize other professors. For example, there's a guy at Columbia University Medical School who's been criticized by his colleagues for giving out advice they think is quack advice. He's kept his job, and the people who criticized him have kept his job. There's a guy, I think it's at Connecticut College, who on Facebook said that Hamas militants were like rabid dogs and should be put down, right? A lot of people on campus interpreted that as meaning he was wanted all Palestinians killed or something, and he was criticized vociferously by his own administration and by other faculty. But he still has his job, and the people who criticized him have their jobs. So when you start sort of making it up as you go along and articulating principles that have not heretofore existed in order to get rid of someone who's made trouble for you, that's a terrible precedent.
Professor, this lawsuit specifies not only a request for damages and costs and all that thing, but also reinstatement. Do you expect that you are going to continue as a Marquette professor at some point in the future?
Yes. Okay. Remember, any university administration, certainly Marquette's, would happily shell out a ton of money to get rid of a professor that causes them trouble. And if you look at the history, I've exposed quite a bit of questionable, and I would say unethical activity at Marquette University. You can just go back and look at 10 years of my blog. So if they could just pay me off, they'd be perfectly happy to pay me off. But that would be a loss for academic freedom because Marquette or any other university, hey, it's not their money. They're not being sued in their personal capacity, right? So yeah, they shell out a lot of money to get rid of a professor who causes them embarrassment, who outs misconduct that they would rather remain secret. So no, to be vindicated, yes, I have to be reinstated.
Is there a dollar figure at which you would walk away?
No.
Right. Well, thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate it.
I trust you don't mind my no answer to that. Well, all else fails, sometimes
Yeah, I know we exchanged. Yeah. Thanks for coming. Oh, it's out early this morning. Oh. That's right.
Our kids go to school.
Here, I'll do my good deed for the day. I don't do these.
I'm just giving you crap.
Now I did my good deed all the way.
No, I have this,
I know, I thought about it after I won.
I know the name. Don't think so. I know the,
Like he was flying.
Yeah, you can see why it is.
I like working with
oh, okay.
Then you left food for care. I think food for station for me.
It's all negotiable, so.
Well, you know,
First they wanted to be
I got there after.
now we just wanted to like,
Jason, who was that? He left from here right around the time we just did that. So I got there in 05.
I went to Marquette.
Well, you forgot me. I thought you remembered. Well, do you remember I was started production there, remember? And then I went down with Paul and Jimmy around 1994, 1995.
Right.
I'm bringing back memories.
No. It's just because I know Dan.
Wait till the cameras are all there.
Want to shoot. Just what he did.
And then,
I didn't know he went straight.
well, I went